Hi everyone, I'm sure all of you are familiar with Frank Tufano at this point. He's been a regular on my channel for quite some time now. He's the guy who always accuses vegans of being weak and malnourished, but just last week he uploaded some training footage where he was looking pretty weak and malnourished himself. In fact, I'm sure if you didn't know any better, plenty of people would mistake him for a vegan.
Frank Tufano? More like Frank Tofu, 'cause you're skinny and weak like all damn other vegans.
Now, Frank's audience is pretty dense. Frank says a lot of crazy and insane things. Just recently, I heard him recommend that pregnant women should regularly consume organ meats, even though doctors and dietitians advise not to, because the vitamin content in these organ meats can cause birth defects in unborn children. So, despite all of this, Frank actually rarely ever sees any opposition in his comment section. His fans generally just go along with anything he says, even though what he's saying is, for the most part, untrue and can be severely harmful. But this is the first time where I've ever seen his audience just completely turn on him. Just take a look at the like-dislike ratio. So this video has to be really bad, and just take a look at the comment section. WTF, Frank, it's 9/11, not April Fools. I love you, Frankie, but your form is terrible. And Frank hearted this. I guess the first part was positive? I never realized how small Frank is, and he hearted this too on a video about how to grow muscle. Okay. If you want to keep your credibility, don't make videos on subjects you know nothing about with dangerous form and outdated information. Don't V-shred yourself, dude. And he still hearted this comment. Now, to be fair to Frank, if Frank were to never make videos on topics he knows nothing about, well, then he just wouldn't be able to make videos anymore. He wouldn't be able to make a living on YouTube. So we're just going to go through Frank's video and give some constructive criticism.
Stop bench pressing for chest growth.
Okay, so we're not even 5 seconds into Frank's video, and we're already off to a pretty rough start. So first thing I would correct here is your terrible form. You're bringing your arms way too far back on these chest flies. All you're doing is putting your shoulders in jeopardy, so you might want to reduce that range of motion a bit before you hurt yourself. And your recommendation to avoid bench pressing in favor of isolation exercises like dumbbell flies is absolutely ridiculous. Compound movements like the bench press are superior to isolation movements when it comes to building muscle mass and building strength. So your advice is completely counterintuitive, and I think the proof is in the soy pudding, Frank. You have no gains, whereas other fitness channels, other vegan fitness channels, like my own, have more gains than you, and I do the bench press. Other channels like John Venus, Nimai Delgado, they all do bench pressing, and they're bigger and stronger than you. And in fact, there are girls, vegan girls on YouTube who are stronger than Frank, like Naturally Stephanie, and I'm not kidding.
I prefer flat dumbbell flies over the incline flies, usually using 10, 15, 20-pound dumbbells throughout all of my sets.
So Frank says he only does dumbbell flies with 10, 15, maybe 20 pounds, which is extremely lightweight. That's extremely weak for male strength standards. Well, Naturally Stephanie, who is a vegan girl here on YouTube, she has a fitness channel, there is video footage of her doing incline dumbbell flies with 7.5 kilogram dumbbells, or 16-pound dumbbells. And this was after she had done the barbell bench press and incline dumbbell bench press. So she was fatigued when she was doing these flies, and she's still using at least as much weight as Frank would use. So I would say that she's probably stronger than Frank, and especially if you take a look at her bench press footage. I don't think Frank can actually lift more weight than she does on the bench press, for one thing, because Frank doesn't even bench press, so Naturally Stephanie, a vegan girl, actually does more hardcore weight training than Frank does. And secondly, they're about the same size. Naturally Stephanie has about the same amount of muscle mass as Frank has. Naturally Stephanie just recently did a physique update video where she weighed herself. She was 124 pounds. Well, on Frank's backstage account, it says that he's 145 pounds, which I'd say is accurate. So there's about a 20-pound weight difference between the two, and you might say, well, okay, Frank probably has an extra 20 pounds of muscle on him. Well, no, you have to factor in the height difference. On Frank's backstage account, it says he's 5 foot 10 inches tall. Well, naturally, Stephanie is only 5 foot 5 inches tall. So when you factor in this 5-inch height difference, there's probably not much of a difference in terms of like lean body mass between the two. So Frank actually has probably less gains than a vegan girl here on YouTube. He can't lift as much weight and he's about the same size.
Oh my god, you can't even lift more than a vegan girl? Isn't meat supposed to make you more manly? You sure you ain't eating no soy milk?
Everyone loves hopping on the bench press on chest day and working their way up to their rep maximum in some capacity. But doing heavy weight is not conducive to optimal muscle recruitment from a hypertrophy standpoint.
And it should come as no surprise that Frank has absolutely no idea of what he's talking about. So there are different types of muscle fibers. There are fast twitch fibers, slow twitch fibers, and there are other fiber types that are basically a mix between fast and slow twitch. Now, fast twitch muscle fibers respond best, they do the most amount of growing when you're training with heavier weight. Slow twitch fibers, they respond best when you're training with lighter weights, higher reps. And for this reason alone, it is a good idea to mix up the amount of weight and repetitions you're doing each set. You don't always want to be training with heavy weight, but you also don't always want to be training with lighter weight. You want to mix things up to maximize the growth of these different fiber types. Now, one very important thing to keep in mind is that your fast twitch fibers are the biggest type of muscle fiber, and they're the ones that do the most amount of growing. So, for that reason, your training should be biased towards heavier weight training, since that fiber type is the type of fiber that's going to do the most amount of growth. Also consider that different muscles on your body have different concentrations of these fiber types, and generally speaking, your chest has a higher concentration of fast twitch muscle fibers. So for chest training, you should be even more biased towards heavyweight training. So once again, Frank's advice is completely unintuitive, and that kind of explains why he has less gains than a vegan girl.
My general training philosophy is time under tension, high volume, short rest time, moderate repetition tempo, and taking the muscle to failure nearly every set. However, I do this with a light weight to isolate the muscle, so the rep range is usually 15 to 20 for the lighter sets and 10 to 12 for the moderate weight sets. With this technique, you can even perform compound exercises without using accessory muscles.
Okay, so more really weird, bizarre claims. So Frank thinks that if he uses a lighter weight, that will reduce activation of secondary movers in an exercise. Well, of course, that's not how things work. Weight does not modulate activation of secondary movers. Technique modulates activation of secondary movers. And of course, Frank is using terrible technique here. His shoulders are shrugged up and forward, making his shoulders become more activated when he performs this exercise. So what he wants to do is have his shoulders down and back, which will increase the activation in his chest. Frank's repetitions are also very inconsistent. He has frequent form breakdowns, and he tends to do way too much range of motion. So here you can just see his arms going way too far back, putting his shoulders at risk of injury. So my advice to Frank is to, 1, hire a personal trainer. I think in only 1 or 2 sessions you could at least learn how to perform some of these exercises properly and safely, and 2, maybe never give anyone workout advice again.
First exercise is a cable crossover with several variations. The first is my favorite, where I love to bend over.
Well, Frank, with your film history, I think we already knew you like to bend over.
I wanted to thank you for being such a good boyfriend. You were my first experience with a guy. And if we were still together, I wouldn't want to let you go.
This can be done facing away from the machine, as most people do, but you can also face towards the machine for exercise variance, showing off your glutes to a gym full of sweaty dudes.
So I don't think Frank was actually joking when he suggested that he's trying to show off to guys in the gym. He's just completely wasting his time. He's doing just the same movement over and over and over again with just slight variations. And on top of that, he's training with very light weight that's not going to stimulate his chest to grow. And he's doing a body part split. He's only training his chest once per week, which just leaves gains on the table. I don't care if Frank has an attraction to the same sex. That's his business. But seems like he's just going to the gym to pick up dudes rather than actually work out. And that shows with his lack of gains.
Dips are actually the only pressing movement I still do. I find they stimulate the upper chest very well. By using an assisted dip machine, I can lighten my body weight enough so I don't have to activate my triceps too much.
So, Frank, again, the amount of weight you're lifting with does not impact the involvement of secondary movers, and you only weigh 145 pounds. Why would you need to reduce the amount of weight you're using on dips?
Once in a while, I will do a chest press or even a barbell bench press, but it's usually with a very light amount of weight. You know, typically on the barbell bench press, maybe 65 or 85 pounds.
So, like I said, naturally Stephanie, a vegan girl, is stronger than Frank. So Frank says he only ever benches as high as 85 pounds. Well, here's footage of naturally Stephanie benching 47.5 kilograms for 3 sets of 10, which is 105 pounds. So... Frank can't even outlift a vegan girl on YouTube, and he's giving strength and muscle growth advice. Oh my god. So after all of Frank's fans and followers called him out on this terrible advice, he tried to do damage control, where on a live stream he claimed that because he's such an expert in nutrition, well, obviously he's an expert in exercise science.
As soon as I go, it's like, you guys are willing to listen to me about dietary stuff that you've never heard about before. And then as soon as I go into fitness and talk about fitness concepts that you guys haven't heard about before, it's like, oh, no, you're wrong, Frank. Hold on. You came to my channel and you learned about nutrition and you learned about dietary concepts that I developed. But now that I'm going to fitness, because you have some preconceived notions about fitness, whereas nutrition, you might have been a little lost before, to me, it doesn't really make sense why. I just find it a little bit insulting to my intelligence that people would think I'm at a certain level with nutrition and that I'm at a different level with fitness. But if people don't appreciate my fitness stuff, I'm not going to bother with it.
So I think Frank made a very important point here. The reason no one will listen to your workout advice, Frank, is because it very obviously doesn't work. Weight training is a relatively simple topic, and most people understand that if you lift heavy weights, you train hard and consistently, you'll make gains, you'll grow muscle, you'll get stronger. But you do none of those things. You do not lift heavy, you barely lift any weight at all, and your workouts are not hard. They're very easy, and it just shows in your physique. You barely have any muscle mass, and vegan girls on YouTube are outlifting you. So people can just plainly see by your results that you have no idea of what you're talking about, and people have a good enough grasp on the topic to begin with. Nutrition, on the other hand, that does confuse a lot of people, and unlike with weight training, you can have a terrible diet and look great. The results of a bad diet might not catch up to you until decades down the line. So you can get away with saying shit like this.
Hey Frank, because during pregnancy it's advised not to eat raw foods, what would you advise? Okay, so, you know, a lot of pregnant women come to me and they say, oh, I'm not supposed to eat raw food, I'm not supposed to do this, I'm not supposed to do that. I tell them, okay, you want your baby to be as sick, as unhealthy, and as frail as every other baby there is, go ahead, listen to the doctor, do that. If you want to be the healthiest version of yourself, observe what our ancestors ate, observe the diets of hunter-gatherers, and look at the foods that they fed their children. You know, the Inuit, the First Nation Alaskans used to feed their children raw kidneys. They would give them raw fish roe, raw fish eggs, you know, really high-quality animal fats, bone marrow. So they would give their kids really, really nutrient-dense foods. And It's hard, you know. I mean, if I could answer that question, yeah, I mean, I'm going to give my kids high quality nutrient dense animal foods, whether they're raw or cooked. And the amount of bacteria that's in a freshly slaughtered animal, you're way more likely to get sick from eating vegetables than you are eating raw meat if it's from a quality source.
So I hope this is a realization to some of Frank's fans and followers that his nutrition advice is just as bad as his weight training advice. If he can't understand very simple, basic concepts of weight training, why would you expect him to understand a topic that is as complex and nuanced as nutrition and health? And after all of this criticism he's received, he still has not retracted a single one of his claims. He has not corrected any misinformation in his weight training video, and he's just doubled down, and he does the exact same thing when it comes to nutrition. This person does not care about evidence, he does not care about giving you the facts. All he wants is attention, I guess.
I love to bend over, showing off your glutes to a gym full of sweaty dudes.
And if you like this video, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon or through my website. I have some funding perks you may find interesting. If you're looking for clothing, then check out the Vegan Gain store. And as always, keep making those vegan gains.
What a relief! When will this poisonous product cease? This is another public service announcement. You can believe it or you can doubt it. Let us begin now with the cow. The way it gets to your plate and